I'm often asked, do you imagine the Nuremberg trials for Palestine? No, I imagine the Palestine trials, like trials that happen everywhere, from Latin America to Asia, to Africa, and in Europe, and in the US, inshallah, one day.
Would you like to begin by introducing yourself?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the Occupied Palestinian Territory. You just made a mess, and I'm basically what's this job is to document, investigate, and report on the violations of international law that take place in the Occupied Palestinian Territory. And this is what I've been doing for the past 3 years. And this is what I will be continue to do for the next 3 years, inshallah.
So before we actually get onto the report, a lot of the people listening in might be like me, where we have no kind of background knowledge on international law or law of any kind. And so I guess the best place to start is really asking because the report is based on companies that are complicit in genocide, but also in the occupation of Palestine, apartheid, more widely. And so I guess the first or the best place to start is by asking, what obligations do companies have in the first place to abide by international law? Do they? And if so, how?
Yeah. Just to put things in context, because I do see that there is an over-reliance on international law, but also a lot of confusion about what it is, in fact. International law is a system of rules that member states have agreed upon and to regulate their life, their interactions, but also to protect us. This is a recent conquest, in fact, of the past 60, 70 years. And this is also, for me, the most interesting part of international law, human rights law. So our rights are protected, and this is not, human rights are not a magic wand. They are our sword and our shield. Now, moving to your question. Are private actors, are companies bound by international law? Yes. Although the main obligations under international law are of states. States have an obligation to regulate the conduct of the private sector, and including at the international level, and to ensure the protection of human rights, including by the private sector, to investigate, prosecute, address human rights violations, and also provide remedies. Ensure that there is remedy provided when businesses, private actors have committed international violations. However, this doesn't mean that companies do not have responsibilities under international law. In fact, it's interesting because there have been defining moments that have shed light on the need for accountability of corporations, because corporations have been enablers or drivers of dispossessions and subjugation of entire communities and indigenous peoples. Think of settler colonialism. Settler colonialism has been either driven or enabled by companies. However, there have been, as I said, defining moments, like, for example, the genocide that occurred in Europe, the Nazi-fascist genocide, resulted in the post-Holocaust industrialist trials. This is the first time that companies were held accountable for their partaking into the genocide of the Jewish people. Then another defining moment has been the end of the apartheid in South Africa, which has brought scrutiny over the role of private companies in exploiting and enabling non-white South Africans. And again, this is where the guiding principles on business and human rights that now constitute the framework for businesses and private actors were conceived. Now, according to these principles, businesses cannot engage in violations of international law, and there is a three-layer continuum of responsibility. Businesses cannot be directly linked, cannot contribute to, cannot cause a human rights impact. So the threshold is pretty low. And however, if they do, they incurred into responsibility and possibly, if the activity is if the violation is a crime, an international crime, like in this case, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, they might face also liability for the companies and their CEOs.
But how do they ensure that? So does it come from researching before, like who they're selling to, kind of a history, or how does it look like? Because how are they able to predict whether a state or whoever's buying their product is going to use them to commit violations?
There is a process. And normally what the guiding principles stipulate is that there is something called due diligence. So a company is obliged, especially when operating abroad or in context where the rule of law system or the regulatory framework might be shaky and allow for violations, they have to ensure due diligence. Due diligence means that they run a check and they make sure that they are not directly linked, they do not contribute to, and they do not cause human rights abuses, human rights impact. It's them, it's a responsibility that they have, and if they don't do that, well, there should be a scrutiny system that allows the state to kick in. However, the system is not very protective of individuals, and while companies have been historically influenced the lawmaking process, they've also carved an area of opaqueness for them. There is ambiguity in the way the framework is applied. However, at the national system and international system, there are mechanisms, but it takes quite some effort and action to bring businesses to account. And this is the challenge, because think of some of the companies I mentioned in the report, Elbit or Palantir, or large companies like the Israeli military industry. They have capitals to invest, and it's including in legal defense. So it's an enterprise in itself.
Yeah, because as you're speaking about that, I'm thinking, how have we then ended up at this stage? How have we ended up at a stage where so many companies have now become complicit in so many different crimes in historical Palestine? And so I guess the best way to ask that question would be, what are there loopholes to these laws that they've managed to exploit that have now allowed them to get to this stage?
Look, I think the loophole has not been in the legal framework per se. There are violations that have been committed against the Palestinians since even before the State of Israel was created. However, in the Occupied Palestinian Territory, there are companies that have been involved in dealings with Israel since 1967, since the beginning of the occupation, since the United Nations Security Council ordered Israel to withdraw the occupation. And instead of doing that, Israel has built colonies after colonies after colonies. Now, the question is, that rather than a loophole in the legal system, I think there is a complete distortion of reality, and there is an overturned window through which we have looked at what's happening in Palestine, and we have been focusing on the one hand on symptoms, including the United Nations. They have cured the symptoms rather than focusing on the overall infrastructure of illegality that Israel has imposed in the Palestinians and the why. Why Israel has maintained the occupation? Why Israel has committed crimes as it breathes against the Palestinians? Because the erasure of Palestinians from Palestine was ultimately the goal of a given political ideology that might not have been heartfelt or wanted by all Israelis, but it has been the dominant ideology. So, and the thing is that had companies who have been put on notice in the last 10, 20, 30 years that Israel was committing crimes, observed proper due diligence, they would have pulled out years, decades ago from their engagement with the unlawful occupation. They have stayed engaged in, when I say in an economy of occupation which is made of displacing the Palestinian through weaponry and physical segregation and surveillance, and then replace them, replacing their villages with settlements, their orchards with their fields, settler exploited fields, and they've built an economy of good and service production and a tourism industry and so on and so forth, supply chains serving this. And the system would not have been held together without a web of enablers, facilitators who have lended funds like pension funds, banks and other financial institutions, and legitimacy. Think of universities engage, or the charities engaging with the occupation. And this, I could have written this report 2 decades ago. But today, there is something much worse that I have observed and I found, is that this economy in the last 20 months has turned into economy of genocide, where not only companies have not pulled out, they've made profits out of...
They've entrenched themselves more.
Yeah.
You believe?
Yeah, they've made gains out of it. They've profiteered out of the killing machine that Israel has unleashed against the Palestinians. Yeah.
I mean, I was going to now ask one more, I guess, law-based question, but I think we can kind of keep the idea of accountability maybe more towards the end and kind of apply it into this context instead of asking the general framework of accountability, because I think it's good to now get into the...
No, but can I say something
before? Of course, go for it.
Sorry,
of course.
Just because I think it's important. When you say this framework is applicable to the Palestinians, but to so many countries where multinationals' Vulturism is in fact crushing people's right of self-determination. Because eventually we need to think in terms of, think of Congo. Congo is the richest country on earth and is the place where people, indigenous people, suffer the most because they do not enjoy a thing of the richness, of the wealth they have. However, in the case of Palestine, there are international proceedings for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And also there is an advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice that has declared in the most clear terms that Israel's occupation is unlawful, must be dismantled totally and unconditionally. And so there is an obligation upon states not to recognize as legal, not to aid and assist in any possible ways this unlawful endeavor, which is also translates into the imposition of racial segregation and apartheid against the Palestinians. Therefore, what else is to be done? And now this is the flipping point. We need to stop, because certain countries start saying, oh, we need to impose sanctions on the settlers and we need to divest from, or we need to stop importing settlement goods. Yeah, this is the Old Testament. This is the past century. Because in fact, today, I mean, it's like asking whether member states should sanction apartheid South Africa. Of course, it's the state of it's the state of South Africa which has been practicing the crime. So we need to stop this schizophrenia of believing that there is a good Israel and a bad Israel. There is an Israel which commits crimes, including through the occupation, and it's the state of Israel we need to face sanctions and divestment.
Sure. So I guess, well, let's start talking a bit about the basics of the report then. So let's start off at the ground level. What were the objectives and what were some of maybe what was the most egregious thing that you came to see through this report? Oof. What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
It's been haunting, really. I've been wanting to investigate the business and human rights sectors for a couple of years. Then there was the genocide and I had to shift focus. Because it was clear to me that there were people profiting. The reason, for example, the first time I realized this was when I wrote my report about the detention system, how Israel uses the occupied Palestinian territory, I said in my second report, as a panopticon. As it's the overall occupation that entraps the Palestinians, that imprisons the Palestinians, because there is the carcerality behind bars, which is very easy. It's very easy to be arrested if you are a Palestinian. I mean, you are presumed guilty until proven innocent, which is typical of regimes of racial segregation. However, there is an entrapment of of Palestinians beyond bars because of the carcerality, of the aesthetics of the carcerality, the segregated roads, the fences, the checkpoints, and then the permit system. I mean, Palestinians they depend on Israel for every instance of life where they take residence. If they want to leave their Bantustan, if they want to move out of Gaza, out of the West Bank into Gaza and vice versa, into Jerusalem, if they want to travel or study abroad, if they want to come back, if they want to get married, if they want to open a business. And there is also the surveillance system. So it was a prison. And while investigating that, I realized how many international companies were enmeshed in this system. However, what has shocked me is to see, on the one hand, how widespread is the complicity of private companies, the fact that many of them do stay engaged with Israel with intent and purpose, and the argument they make to defend themselves and to pretending that they do not understand what's going on. And in these darkest hours where Palestinians have been literally slaughtered, this is the thing, I will never recover from what I've seen over the past 1 year and a half. You don't need to be Palestinians to realize that this has been the most traumatic thing many of us have ever been exposed to. And seeing that there were people even, able to smile in front of cameras and say, yes, I've supported this, they're killing terrorists. Yeah. What else? When the 70% of the victims were women and children, and not to say that the rest of the 30% deserve to die just because they are men, you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, it's been difficult to make sense that the system is so broken. And if Palestine was a crime scene, it would carry the fingerprints of all of us.
Yeah. Of course, yeah, of course.
This is painful.
I mean, on that note, it's. You've now started to describe a bit about just how entrenched everything is. My question is, in this genocide, how dependent has Israel been on the corporate entities? Do you think it would have been possible to really have such a wide-scale attack and genocide without kind of them, basically?
No. My sense is that this genocide would have not been possible would have not been possible for 20 months without the support of the private sector with states behind them, because a number of Western states, but also some Arab states, are completely entangled in the process. And look. Think of the banks, the finance sector. I mean, Israel's economy went into a deficit already a few months after October 7 because of the military expenditure that Israel Israel had to face. And so banks and other financial institutions have not only helped sell Israeli bonds, have lended credibility to Israeli markets and economy, where the trust of the markets was shaking. And while the economy had started nosediving because of the military expenditure, but also because of everything had stopped around Israel, all industries and businesses, and there were forcibly displaced Israelis from the north and the south, and there were businesses closing down. There has been this huge, massive injection of capitals through the banks and financial institutions, but also others. I mean, charities and other sectors, including universities, have kept developing tools, refining the mechanics of the genocide, like the devices, the unmanned technology, the F-35 program that has been really tested in Gaza. I mean, when I mention this, it's really disturbing. But think of the name: an airplane flying in beast mode, because it is to carry as many weapons as possible in order to inflict the most harm. Yeah. yeah, you can see, and it was a test.
Yeah.
It was a test. How deep are the craters going to be? Mm-hmm. And how did Israel and others know about how those craters could be has proven very useful when it came to bombing Iran and looking for reaching the nuclear
So they're
facilities.
keeping the economy afloat, basically, is what you're saying.
Yes, of course.
They're making this all possible.
Yes, yes. But also, again, there is a profiteering element, because the machinery that had been used to destroy villages and life in the West Bank has been turned and has been brought to Gaza. And I understand companies like Volvo and Hyundai resenting the fact of being in my report, because Hyundai and Volvo are names that are associated, to motorcycles and these safe cars. And yes, for the children in Gaza, they will be associated to the logos that I've seen on the bulldozers that have destroyed what remains of their homes and even crushed bodies. So there is video evidence of it. And they've been, I
guess that kind of begs the question, though. We've it's been often reported generally in the media or whatever, or just on social media, this idea of the military-industrial complex in the US and how many of these companies, Lockheed Martin, and there's a want for war because that's when they manage to make money. But in some of these other sectors, what's the motivation for them to stay involved with Israel? Like how sustainable is it for them? Because it's just going to inflict bad, it's going to look bad on them in the long term, as you've just said with Volvo and Hyundai.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I don't think that there is one answer. But what I've learned, and I'm sure there are financial and economic experts who are better placed than me to go deeper into this question. But my sense is that there is a risk assessment that is very clear for companies. Think of Airbnb. There has been a moment where Airbnb came under such pressure that triggered withdrawal from the settlements. And then the counter pressure and the financial risk of becoming entangled into legal disputes and others prompted Airbnb to reactivate what? They're promoting properties in nice neighborhoods in Judea and Samaria. But the point is that not only this property are on stolen land, but very often they are in settlements who actively engage in repression and torment inflicted on the Palestinian community, and especially in the last 20 months, because while there has been attention and greater understanding of the reality of the destruction in and of Gaza, very little connection is made with the reality in the West Bank, because the Palestinians in the West Bank have experienced same erasure, but at a different speed and of a different scale. But the intent is the same, is to destroy the Palestinians as such, to advance their ethnic cleansing. This is the last stage. Yesterday I was speaking to an Israeli activist who's been, of course, he stands against genocide, occupation. He's been spending night after night in the West Bank, and there is just 50 Israelis who interpose themselves between the settlers and the army, and they come back in bleeding every day, and they say, but what happens to us is nothing. Now Israel and yesterday he was really desperate over the phone, saying, but why don't you say that what's going on in the West Bank is the completion of the Nakba? Look around in the Jordan Valley, Road 90 and Allon Road, there are no Palestinian herder communities anymore. And I think that the fact is that the Palestinians it's not that they've lost their voice, not at all. But look, those in the West Bank as well are under such pressure and a continuous assault. To think of the destruction of the refugee camps. Israel is trying everything it can to complete or to advance its plan as much as possible.
So going back to one of the things that you said there was pressure and counter pressure for a lot of these companies. Does that play a role? Because in the report as well, you described the 8 sectors of complicity, basically. And I'm now wondering how interlinked they are and whether they are dependent on one another in some way, or whether it really is more of a case of local pressures that determine how, like, their involvement.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Who are they?
The companies, as in, so you have
different companies.
So you have the different sectors of complicity.
Yeah, they are totally interlinked. This is why I say, if my report were to be read as a list of companies, I would have failed. Because the point is that it's not that I selected from the 1,000 entities or entries database I put together, I selected companies randomly. I try to follow also certain criteria, meaning how first of all, the various companies named are illustrative of a system, of an ecosystem that it's like a Jenga tower. No? Each piece rely on the balance created by the standing together of the other pieces. And they are all together. Some pieces are more indispensable than others. So, for example, I think that the arms manufacturers and the surveillance and the construction related companies are more indispensable to the process than those involved in the tourist industry.
Sure.
But again, the tourist industry still stays engaged, and this is why today there is a holistic strategy that can and should be developed, where everyone realizes or wonders what is in my power that I can activate, not to contribute to the system, from what I buy, where I put my money, where I invest or what I invest in. And, for example, I understand, and this is a question that has been asked times and times against me over the past 3 days, but are you saying that we cannot buy technology anymore? You need to have your voice heard as consumers, as workers, as shareholders. Everyone has a power, and investigative journalists, and then civil society. I mean, there is strategic litigation that can be started. Now, I understand that it will be, there are already legal cases brought before court against, for example, Airbnb and Booking.com, and there are other online tourism platform that will be held accountable. But there is so much that can be done outside courts by us. If, for example, those who are listening to us, now it's summer has started. If for 1-2 months you discontinued your Airbnb and Booking.com account, this will make a difference. And also you need to accompany this with a direct message to the owner of the company saying, I'm not going to support you. I'm not going to benefit from your services anymore. I understand it's a sacrifice, but is it not an affordable and really compelling sacrifice that everyone must do in the face of a people who are losing everything they have?
Going to your analogy of the Jenga tower, I also asked you before how sustainable it is for the companies to remain sort of involved and everything. Obviously, the higher a Jenga tower gets, the more shaky it gets, the less stable it gets. Do you believe this also to be the case for the Israeli economy of genocide in that sense? The longer this goes on, the less sustainable it becomes for Israel?
I don't know if that analogy works, but I think, and this is probably what I would like to say, it's not about destroying the system, destroying the market. I mean, bankers and insurers and people in the city, don't freak out. I'm not calling for the end of your job. I'm just asking for you to engage in your job in a way that doesn't translate into enabling the meat grinder that Gaza has become. And this is a call, this is a moment of awakening. And so dismantling the Jenga tower means building with the pieces we have something else. Also because, I mean, this is applicable. What I'm saying is applicable to everywhere else. I mean, look at companies are often whitewashing through their engagement activities that are detrimental, for example, to the environment. This cannot continue. We cannot continue to destroy everything Mother Earth has given us because it's not sustainable. And so may we take this opportunity and this moment of reckoning to start investing or to continue to invest in activities that are not destructive and preserve ourselves. Also because, look, the Palestine crisis has ignited a global crisis. The way countries like governments like in the UK or in Germany, in Italy, in France are reacting so as to crack down on people's protest and fundamental freedoms, freedom of association, freedom of expression. Bear the question, why so? Because we are interconnected. And so the system is reacting by protecting itself. Who are the governments serving? Whose interests? Are ours as individual citizens or groups who do not control capitals, algorithms, and weapons? Or those who control algorithms, weapons, and capitals? And this is a moment for everyone, including every citizen, to wonder whether they want to be the next, because who are these weaponry and this surveillance technology that our states are investing in, shifting 5% of the state budget? Who are they, and diverting it from essential services like health and education? Who are they going to be used against? Might be us one day.
Absolutely. I mean, you semi-answered the question that I was about to ask in terms of how we can, whether it's reformable, this entire situation, this entire economy, because often, especially Palestinians, Lebanese, Syrians, people who have really bear the brunt of Israeli brutality over the years, we say that Zionism is not something that can be reformed because its direct principle is to displace, for example, in the case of Palestinians, and to be a regional hegemon without allowing anybody to get near it. And so I'm wondering whether you see a difference between that and the economy of genocide, so to say. Like, you kind of answered the question already in terms of whether it's, I guess more specifically, I don't know how best to ask this.
No, but I think I got it. Can we go back, or how can it be reformed? I wouldn't answer on the ground of the ideology, although I'm cognizant that every ideology, from communism to fascism, Zionism as well, Zionism is an ideology, it's not a religion. So they can produce dangerous results. But let's move toward a positive discourse, what we must do and how. Look, I think it's very dangerous what lays bare before us, the future that waits for us if we keep on staying on this path of lawlessness, is that we will miss very much human rights, where they will be taken away from us one by one. So we are suspended between the precipice, the abyss, and the hope, where hope is a discipline. And we need to change. We need to, first of all, understand the system we are part of. This is why I say Palestine often works as the red pill in Matrix. Watch it if you have not done so. But so it's a moment of awakening and realize that we have gone too far, and we need to return to a place where respect for international law, respect for domestic law, and the latter is to be subjected to the former, is the rule and never the exception. And the exception, when it occurs, it leads to accountability.
In that sense, I mean, if we now, what I was going to ask at the beginning in terms of about accountability from a legal perspective, are there conditions or situations now developing, for example, the case at the ICJ for genocide of the Israelis, that could shape change, basically, and how it could lead to some of these corporate entities to divest and to de-involve themselves, uninvolve themselves?
Look, I think that I would like to go back to this about the legal concept of accountability, because there might also be something outside of the legal framework that must enter our vocabulary. And this is probably some nasty administration would define it walk, but who cares? So first of all, I think that it's important to realize that the international justice system, which is conservative, the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice are made of judges, human beings, are not particularly progressive. They're not even regressive, but they also rely on member states. For example, the International Court of Justice advisory opinion of 2024, which declared the occupation in West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem unlawful, was groundbreaking and very revolutionary in many respects. It really provoked a seismic shift and went as far as a court could go in many respects. But why? Because there were 60 member states interjecting, participating in the process, providing interpretation. And so the courts eventually based itself upon state practice as asserted in the proceedings. Now, there are member states who are clearly attacking the ICJ and the International Criminal Court for the arrest warrants that the court has issued against 2 Israeli leaders. So, for example, yesterday there was an airplane in which the ICC wanted Prime Minister of Israel was traveling, and he flew over Greece, Italy, and France, 3 member states who are signatory of the Rome Statute. This is in breach of the ICC rules. And again, by continuing to distort and violate the administration of justice and the ICC stated, they will erode the possibility, the effectiveness of the international legal system, and particularly the international justice system. But there is the international criminal justice system is premised upon complementarity with domestic courts, and this is where I see the difference. Now it's time for prosecutors and civil society, conscientious lawyers to work to bring justice. I'm often asked, do you imagine the Nuremberg trials for Palestine? No, I imagine the Palestine trials, like trials that happen everywhere, from Latin America to Asia, to Africa, and in Europe, and in the US, inshallah, one day. So things can happen. And the fact that there is a young generation, which is much more understanding of the reality of Palestine today, despite the indoctrination and the erasure of Palestine from the public discourse, including in the West, is something that gives me hope. But hope that we need to work more. It's not hope that it will hand by itself.
Of course.
A lot of work to do.
Yeah. That's the perfect way to lead on to the next question. Go for it.
Healing. Healing is the word that we need to bring to the table, because there is a lot, before political solutions, what the Palestinians will need, and they will be, and I think there is a predisposition to do that, because I don't even know how they do, but they have endured so much that somewhat they have developed, and I wouldn't romanticize this because this is also dehumanizing, but they have developed a capacity to adapt to injustice and rebuild themselves. They have rebuilt themselves over and over from the fragments of exile. And not just the exile that Israel has caused from historical Palestine and from the occupied Palestinian territory, but think of how many times thousands or dozens of thousands of Palestinians have been forced into exile, including from Arab countries. And Kuwait, and Libya, and Syria, and Lebanon, and so there is something in the veins of these people who make me think that they will be able to rebuild themselves. But for it to happen, there should be space. And look at also the opportunity of redemption that we have as Western countries, our Western societies. This is why I say member states who have a port in the Mediterranean Sea must send navies with doctors and humanitarian aid, real humanitarian aid, not that abomination that is the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, otherwise, understood as a death trap. So there is healing that is to be given as not as a response, as first aid space for Palestinians, but also in the long term for the Israelis, because this society has gone completely havoc over the past 20 months and it's collapsing. And I do not expect the Palestinians to be the ones taking care of it, frankly. It should be expected that they are the ones continuing to educate and be there. Yeah. But it's upon us as international community to make sure that for the Israelis there is not just accountability, because those who have engineered and executed this genocide should be held accountable, but also they should be held accountable also for what they have done to a young generation of 18, 19, 20-year-old young Israelis who have been indoctrinated to the point of becoming the willful executioners of a genocide.
I've got one or two more questions before we start going into some of the questions that our lovely audience has put forward to you. One of them is just on that note, you kind of touched on it a tiny bit. You mentioned the word hope. I think if some of the people read just how expansive the report is, it might lead to the opposite reaction where you see just how big a giant it is that we're coming up against, just how, and the individual person might struggle to realize how they can by themselves make a difference. And so what would you say to them?
Yeah, this is why I was telling people, watch Matrix. The moment Nemo, spoiler, wakes up, it's damn painful. And learn from your mothers and sisters and friends. What do we do when we give birth? Breathe through the pain. It's painful and trust the process. But at the same time, again, as women know, when you create a new reality, it's damn difficult, and you push through the pain as well. And this is what we have to do. We need to work together to make it happen. There is something extremely powerful and redeeming in us as a humanity if we stand together for Palestine today. And again, I don't think that Palestine, I was driving with an Ethiopian taxi driver who's saying, no, I'm not engaged with Palestine because look at the mess in my own country. And I think that this is something that many people in Africa would say. They've been engulfed in conflicts that people don't even know of. People in the West don't even consider. We just see people from the global South as troublemakers when they reach our coasts as refugees or asylum seekers. Again, Palestine today is a revealer. Palestine today is showing how to undo the system politically, culturally, the racism that underpins certain political choices, and then economically. So this is why I think we are at a turning point in history. What we will be next depends on who we are today.
Well, as warm as it is in here, I did kind of get goosebumps as you were saying that there. That was very inspirational for me as well.
Is it good?
Yeah, very good. Just a mic difficulty, no worries. My final question is more of an unfortunate one that we kind of have to speak about just because of the way that the world works. The US government, hours after you released the reports, came in instantly smearing you, calling you an anti-Semite like clockwork, and all of these other things to defame you and bring your name down. Firstly, what's your response? And secondly, how do you interpret the response given how quick it was and how rash it was? Do you think it reflects maybe on their position and maybe it's starting to feel like an untenable position for them as well?
Yeah, of course. Of course it does. I don't even think we should spend too much time talking about that, but there is something that made me laugh. Besides how depressing these all arguments against my mandate is, but there is one part of the letter that the U.S. administration sent to the UN Secretary General who says that I'm a threat to the global economy. And then my husband, you see, I've always told you. So you are a threat, not just to the family economy. So, I mean, yeah. It's fine. Let's move on and talk about serious issues.
Sure. I mean, one of the questions that we actually got from one of the people here listening in was to ask, well, firstly, I'll read out the full thing. Thank you for your courage and the clarity of your moral compass. Your work is life-affirming for me as a Palestinian. I'm wondering how you deal with these libelous accusations of one-sidedness and all the vicious personal attacks that accompany these accusations. How do you stay centered whilst also addressing these damaging distractions which are clearly meant to derail a straightforward and research-based set of findings and conclusions?
Look, I'm going to answer this question, but also with a caveat. Had I been 20 years younger, I wouldn't have had the moral clarity that I have today. Hadn't I lived in Palestine and run away because of the apartheid, I wouldn't have the moral clarity I have today. Hadn't I been a lawyer and a human rights lawyer, I wouldn't have necessarily the rationale or the lens that I have today. So it's a combination of things. And also, hadn't I grown up in a country and in south of Italy, which has been plagued by criminal organizations like the mafia, now like in Sicily, the place where part of my family comes from, my husband, I mean, a land that I love deeply. This land has been plagued by the mafia that, unlike what Hollywood has portrayed, is not just made of just brutal thugs. It's in fact a system within a system that thrives through the collusion of the political landscape, political actors, and financial economic interests. And when unveiling this system, judges, lawyers, scholars, journalists, activists have been silenced and even killed. They've lost their life. So I know that when I see mafia-style techniques of intimidation and repression, I recognize something that can only succeed where people are scared and are silenced. The way to win over this system is uniting and feeling like one, is the society coming together. This is how people in Sicily have reacted, which doesn't mean that they have completely got rid of the mafia, but it's not as strong as it used to be. And it's a process. And this is where we are collectively. So how do I stay strong and in the face of all of this? I don't care. I don't care of what I tell about me. I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing that. There is no glory in becoming known because of a genocide. In the time of a genocide, I want the end of it, and I want to return to my life, to my children, to my mother, and as soon as possible. But I won't rest until this genocide is over and until the system which underpins it and has enabled it is held to account, which means that I might be around for a while. I know that I'm not alone.
Definitely. Another question that we got, you sort of answered the first part of the question involving intimidation tactics by also governments. For example, here in this question specifically, it's about the UK government and its intimidation tactics against, for example, pressure groups, as we've seen very recently. What impact does this have on in a legal perspective?
Well, clearly it has a chilling effect on society. But look at the Palestinians. I mean, they, as a people, they have been as an Australian Palestinian friend says, they've been killed, they've been blamed, they've been smeared. Even now, in the time of genocide. And it has happened on UK TV as well, and UK media. We see that this is the tactics, this is the set of tactics that are used. What response we give to these impacts the outcome and the longevity of the repression. I think that there is a shrinking space for civil society in the UK, but also in other places like in Germany or in Italy. And the thing is that as the anti-mafia resistance movement shows is that they cannot kill us all. They cannot silence us all. They cannot fire us all yet. So there is a moment, a window opportunity that is to be seized, and we need to push back all together. So more protests, more disruption, more accountability more push for accountability of government and private actors alike, university alike. And on this note, I want to commend all the young people who have tried their best to hold their universities to account. I hope that the little that I could represent of your work in my report gives you strength, because it has been very inspirational to me and to many like me who have also found a reason to go after, again, apparently neutral entities like universities, and will continue to do so.
Our final question is, what do you think the impact of complicity is for other regions of the planet, especially the global south?
Look, when it comes to Palestine, there is no one state which has really clean hands, because of how intermingled the system is and how interconnected. This is capitalism. This is the nature of capitalism. But again, it's not about killing capitalism. It's about making capitalism human friendly instead of just a few billionaire or multi-billionaire friendly. And therefore, I see that states in the global south are coming together. Think of the Hague Group, for example. They are coming together to find the strength to resist the pressure, because alone we are frail like wings of butterflies. But if we start clapping all our wings together, we will make a storm, and make the storm with justice.
I think that's a great way to end the episode.
I did it on purpose.
That's amazing. Thank you. So you're a natural. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. And thank you for the 5 cups of tea.
I'll try again afterwards, see if I spill a bit less than I did at the beginning. Let's see. Thank you to all of our listeners today. This episode will be produced and placed online as well afterwards for anybody to watch it again. And thank you. So I can only say thank you so many times for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.